In computer graphic world, there are two types of graphic, raster and a vector. First, let's talk about raster. Raster graphics are images made of numerous small squares. When you see images like this, for example, it looks nice and smooth. But notice when we zoom in, we start to see the reality that this image is actually made of these small squares. These small squares are called pixels. The word pixel is actually came from the abbreviation of picture element. Each of the pixel has only one color applied to it. Because raster images are made of pixels, they are resolution dependent. What I mean by that is that if someone says that this image has 100 by 600 pixels resolution, for example, it means that it has 100 columns and 600 rows of total pixels. High resolution images will have finer detail because more color information can be contained by that image, but the file size will be bigger. Basically, the higher the resolution, the bigger the file size. Vector graphics are images made of points, curves connecting those points, and color fields inside the area formed by those curves. These points and curves and color fields are stored as mathematical values, not as pixel grid data like raster images do. So as the result, and generally speaking, vector images are smaller in file size than the raster image version. Vector graphics are also resolution independent. Notice when we zoom in to as far as we can go, we won't see any pixels. We can resize or scale vector graphics to any size we want without the risk of losing any graphical information. Working in vector also gives us more flexibility because we can always go back and change things around. For example, when we draw a circle like this in Illustrator, we can always select it and tweak the shape or recolor it as we like. The shape is still alive and editable. This is something that you cannot do in pure raster images. You might be wondering by now, why not we just use vector for all of our graphics? The answer is, not all images best represented by vector graphics. Complex images like photographs, due to the nature of it, is best represented in raster images. Also because vector graphics are basically a bunch of mathematical values, they need to be calculated and rendered in real time to be displayed on the screen. Generally speaking, complex vector images will require more computing power than the raster counterpart. Because there are advantages and disadvantages of using both of these graphic types, and that you cannot force one graphic type to handle every type of images, therefore there are two types of graphic software in this world: raster-based category and vector-based category. Adobe, for example, provide us with two different softwares for graphic. Adobe Photoshop is designed to help us working with raster images, and Adobe Illustrator is designed for vector graphics. Although in Photoshop, we do have some vector tools, as in Illustrator we have some raster effects as well. But they are not as complete as when we are using what they are designed for. Now, Adobe is not the only company making design or graphic softwares. For raster images, there are other software such as GIMP, Krita, Corel Paint Shop, Affinity Photo, etc. For vector graphics, you can find Inkscape, CorelDRAW, Affinity Designer, etc. I use Illustrator and Photoshop mainly because they are the most common design software in the world, and I've been using them since I learned computer graphics back in the college. That's about almost 20 years now. So to recap what we've discussed in this video, in terms of resolution, raster is dependent and vector is independent. In terms of the file size, vector is the winner as generally smaller size than the raster. In terms of flexibility or editability, vector graphics is better than raster. For displaying photos or natural images, raster is better than vectors. And lastly, for computer processing, generally, vector need more processing power than raster.